Today, let's dive into one of the most epic topic, the Battle of Gaugamela. So, picture this. Alexander the Great, after conquering pretty much everything in his path, decides it's time to take on Darius, the big boss of the Persian Empire. Alright, so Alexander's marching his troops through Mesopotamia, and he's got his eye on Gaugamela, a little village where Darius is supposedly waiting for him. But before he gets there, he's got to cross some rivers and deal with some pesky Persian scouts. Now, when Alexander hears that Darius is camped out at Gaugamela, he's like, alright, time to set up shop. He builds this badass fortified encampment, leaving his non-fighting stuff behind and getting his soldiers ready for action. Fast forward to midnight, and Alexander's army is creeping up on the Persians. They can see the Persian campfires twinkling in the distance, but Alexander's not rushing into anything. Even though his generals are all hyped up for a surprise attack, Alexander's like, nah, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Turns out, the Persians were totally expecting a night attack, so it's a good thing Alexander held back. Oh, and get this, Darius had all these traps set up on the battlefield, but Alexander was one step ahead. He knew about them thanks to some Persian prisoners he captured earlier. So, even though the Persians thought they had the upper hand with their fancy traps, Alexander wasn't falling for it. Alright, so the stage is set for one epic clash at Gaugamela. Picture this. Alexander's army is facing off against Darius and his massive Persian force. Now, let's break down the battlefield setup. On the Persian side, you've got this huge line stretching across the plain. Darius is chilling in the center with a ton of infantry and some elite Greek mercenaries. Meanwhile, on the flanks, you've got these badass cavalry units, along with scythed chariots and even elephants. Yeah, elephants. Now, Alexander's crew might be outnumbered, but they've got some tricks up their sleeve. Their infantry, called phalangites, are no joke. They're packed tight in this formation with these super long pikes called supremacy. Basically, they can start poking the enemy before they even get close. Plus, they're decked out in armor and shields, unlike the Persian foot soldiers who are pretty much just wearing their regular clothes and carrying wicker shields. But here's where things get interesting. Alexander knows the terrain. The smooth plain might seem like it's in favor of the Persians, but any little bump or hole could mess up their cavalry charge. And that's exactly what Alexander's banking on. So, he stations himself on the right with his cavalry buddies, ready to unleash some chaos. In the center, you've got the main phalanx holding strong, slanting backward to cover the left flank where General Parmenio is holding it down with more infantry and some top-notch Thessalian cavalry. But Alexander's not taking any chances. He's got another phalanx chilling behind the main line, just in case things get hairy and they need to turn around to face a surprise attack. Alright, so the Battle of Gaugamela is heating up, and both Alexander and Darius are making some bold moves. First off, Alexander decides to take his cavalry out to the right, trying to outflank Darius's forces. But Darius is quick to respond, sending his own cavalry, led by his cousin Bessus, to keep up with Alexander's maneuver. Meanwhile, as the Macedonian infantry advances, they start experiencing something called phalanx drift, where they naturally start drifting to the right, potentially messing up their formation. Darius sees this and decides to try enveloping Alexander's mercenary cavalry on the left flank. But Alexander's not having it. He launches this hardcore assault right into the center of the Persian left wing, going head-to-head with some of the toughest horsemen around. These guys, the Scythians and Bactrians, are no joke, but Alexander is relentless. The battle gets intense, with both sides losing tons of soldiers in this savage cavalry clash. Alexander's troops are up against some seriously armored warriors, but they keep pushing forward. Meanwhile, Darius decides to bring in the big guns, chariots, and even elephants. But here's the twist. Alexander's light infantry ain't afraid of no elephants or chariots. They start grabbing the reins, taking down horses and drivers left and right. And when some of the chariots try to charge the phalanx, the Macedonian soldiers open up their ranks, letting them through to be dealt with by their buddies in the back. So yeah, the Persian chariot assault, total flop. Sure, they managed to cause some chaos, but the Macedonians held their ground like champs. And now we're diving into the final stages of the Battle of Gaugamela, and it's about to get wild. So, picture this. Darius, seeing Alexander's cavalry move to the right, decides to send his reserve Persian cavalry to contain them. But here's where things get interesting. Alexander, with his keen eye for opportunity, notices a gap opening up in the Persian center. Leaving some of his cavalry to deal with the Persians on the right, Alexander makes a bold move. He wheels his squadrons left, basically doing a complete 180, and charges right into that gap. Leading the charge with his elite companions, Alexander smashes into the Persian lines with sheer force. His phalanx and other infantry units follow suit, and together they tear through the Persian defenses. Darius, seeing the chaos, decides it's time to bounce. He flees the battlefield, and with him goes the morale of many Persian soldiers. But the battle's not over yet. On the Macedonian left, General Parmenion is in a tight spot. Some of his troops followed Alexander into the center, leaving a gap in the line. Persian and Indian cavalry swarm through this gap, causing havoc and even making a move towards the Macedonian camp. But here's where Alexander proves his mettle. Despite being in the thick of the action, he hears Parmenion's call for help and turns back. With his companions, they plow through thousands of withdrawing Persian and Indian cavalry, hacking their way to the Macedonian left. With Alexander's arrival, the tide turns. The Persian left, led by Mazius, realizes they're on the losing end and starts to withdraw. Parmenion's Thessalian horse gives chase, while Alexander resumes his pursuit of Darius with 500 cavalry. The chase continues until dusk, with Alexander's men slaughtering fleeing Persians left and right. Eventually, they halt to rest and water their horses at the river Lycus. And guess what? They stumble upon Darius's chariot, weapons, and treasure at Arbela. Now, let's talk casualties. The numbers are all over the place, but it's safe to say the Persians took a beating. Alexander claims only around 500 of his men died, while the Persians suffered much higher losses. And with Darius's defeat, Alexander's path to conquer Achaemenid Persia is wide open.